Hi everyone, and this is my third blog on grief, and today's blog is going to be entitled, Does Grief Ever End? And I know if you don't ask this question when you're grieving, most of you think this, especially in the beginning, or when it's been a year, 2 years, 3 years, and you still get bogged down with the sadness and you still have moments where you just collapse. Some people have really long periods of prolonged grief, and you just wonder, does this ever get better? Do I ever stop grieving? And so I want to say to you that it just depends on how you think of grief. So uh, the extreme painful grief, the extreme your life is in shambles and everything's up in the air and you don't know how you can go on feeling, that does end. There is an end point. There's no specific date for when it ends. Everybody's different and how you handle it and manage it and how you supported through it and what the relationship was and how many people you have lost and all that. That'll come into play. But there is an end date. There's a time in your life where you do accept what has happened. Time helps you to make sense of things. Working through your grief helps you to live with grief. So although you're not in mourning and bereavement in that way, you still are grieving, and you probably will be grieving for the rest of your life. And that's not a bad thing. That is not a bad thing. And that's what I want to say today, because I want to give you some hope. And I'm someone who's lost a lot of people in my life in various different ways, very important people. The most important person was my mother when I was 17. And that's been over 10 years. And there's been a long journey, and a large portion of that, although I had counseling for a year, my brain wasn't even fully developed for me to go through this, and I didn't really conceptualize this, the finality of everything that was happening to me. I just went through the motions and I carried on. There was a large chunk of my grief buried inside me that remained largely unprocessed for a very long time, nearly a decade. And although in some ways, my other blog, I talk about the continuous bond, that new relationship you have with the deceased person. I definitely developed that and incorporated my mother in my life and had a level of acceptance. But what I didn't manage were those really extreme feelings. And not everyone's going to be like me. And then I had another loss and another loss and another loss, and it all became this mass inside me. And how it came out was in other areas. And so you feel like you've sort of made sense of things. You've had a funeral. You've done a year of the firsts where you've done the first birthday without them, the first this without them, the first that. You've had anniversaries. Maybe some more years have gone by and you still find yourself breaking down, or you can't really look at certain movies, or songs make you cry. Whatever the case may be for you, you will be affected in different ways. But there's a point where you've got to ask yourself, have you really processed this? And for me, I hadn't really processed it. And so it did keep coming out in those other ways. So I really struggled with abandonment issues. You see the world a bit differently. You might think that if someone gets really ill, that's it, they're going to die. Prepare yourself in advance. You may not want to get too close to people. Or you may feel really, like I am, very clingy with your things and your photographs and things like that. Whatever comes out, you change. And it's getting used to that change as well. And so grief doesn't really end in that way, because you've changed. Your whole idea of life has changed. Your idea of how fragile life can be. That bubble that you were in, that this could never happen to me, that gets shattered. And you go on, and the pain doesn't happen as frequently and everything, but you still miss that person. and you will continue to miss that person. And that is so normal and, in fact, really healthy to keep that person close in your heart. It's when we repress those feelings that really intense pain, that doesn't go away. If you're not going to face up to all the array of emotions and what you're going through and the changes within yourself and to your future and embrace what's happened, that's when I'll say the actual grieving that I was talking about in the beginning, that will keep following you through. If you have issues and problems that prevent you from doing that, grief can be a lot more intense for a lot longer. So it's up to you, really. It really is up to you. Everything that you feel in grief is so normal, and our bodies are so equipped to deal with grief. But it's society and the other pressures and life in general that will determine how this affects us, and us as well, how we cope with problems in general, based on past experience, our personality, our supports, and our culture. There's a lot of things that come into play when it comes to grief and how we grieve. Not why we grieve, we all grieve. Even those people who seem to bounce back, that's their way of grieving. They're grieving by distracting themselves or repressing those feelings or preferring not to confront that. And it's up to you how you need to handle your pain. That's what it's about. And to understand a little bit about grief, I really recommend reading grief books. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross and David Kessler have written a really great book on grief. And other stuff on grief. And there's a lot of people who write blogs and, like myself, talk about it. Really help yourself to know how normal it is to be grieving, how other people get through. Find some ways to cope and embrace when you feel sad or when you feel things in grief. Know that this is your way of processing. Every bit of pain that you're feeling is processing this enormous change, this enormous loss in your life. And know that it does end. The intensity of it ends. And then you will have more control. You will still feel pain. You will still feel sorrow and heartache and despair. You might even still feel anger. If you've got unfinished business or anger or regrets and things like that, those are things that you're going to have to work through and can complicate things. You've still got questions about how they died and why they died. It's really difficult, and you've got to do this one step at a time and see it as a process. It really is a process, and it's gradual and it's individual. You are unique. How you're going to handle this and deal with this and cope with this, it's going to be unique. And everything you feel is okay. If you need to take time, I don't know if I could have done my grieving differently. I don't know if I could have gone there. I needed to go to uni. I needed to go and start my life and travel and do things and make new friends and get in a relationship. And I needed to figure some things out. And I needed to be ready to tackle my grief again. I needed to be ready. And that's what it needs to be for you. And you'll find ways to get through, one foot in front of the other. And grief counseling, I say this to anybody who's grieving. If you feel you need that help, get that help. There's even helplines you can call. There are people you can talk to. There's grief groups that you can join where you can be around other people. If it's new and you're struggling to get over it, or it's old and you're struggling to move on from it, really seek that help. Know that there's nothing wrong with you. Know that by letting go of your grief and the intense feelings, you're not letting go of the person. They're not going to go anywhere. You just want that new relationship with them to be a positive one in your life, not something that is holding you down and making you feel like you don't want to be in this world without them anymore. You want to learn how to move through your life again and be okay doing that and still honoring them and still keeping them close to you and not worrying about whether you're going to forget them and what they would think of you now and what they would want for you and from you. You know that in your heart. You know that. So just give yourself that chance. Be kind to yourself and give yourself all the time you need, and know that it will end. The horrible aspects of grief, how you see grief, and all of that, the really intense stuff, there's an acceptance that comes in time. Don't worry about it. You won't drown in these emotions. The more you feel, the more healthy and through this you're going to go. Sorry, that didn't make quite a bit of sense, but you know what I mean. You need to go through it, and the more you release it, the more you give yourself that release. And it's about the process of working through it. So I hope that's been helpful, and I'm very sorry for your loss if you're watching this after losing someone special to you. I'm sending you a hug. Thanks for listening. Bye.